Welcome to Ethos Effect podcast.
Welcome to the Ethos Effect podcast.
Podcast.
After building and learning from failures,
We discovered our ethos and leveraged it
to scale, sell, and build again our seven-figure businesses.
whether you're starting out or leveling up.
This podcast is your source for innovation and lasting impact. Chelsea Ryckis here with Donovan Ryckis on the Ethos Effect podcast. Today we had a very interesting conversation. Some would even call it edgy. We talked to Sherry Rais, CEO and founder of Enthea. What is Enthea?
This is an idea that would have been considered absolutely crazy 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, think of pre-medicinal marijuana or recreational marijuana. Now we're talking about therapy, basically ketamine-assisted therapy along with other psychedelics.
Yeah. And to Donovan's point, you know, depending on what state you're in, you drive around and you see all these marijuana stores. I'm from Canada, so that happened a lot sooner. But I remember coming down to the States and everybody commenting on, oh, you can get marijuana in Canada, and it being like this huge deal. And now it's just commonplace, which is so typical, right? Think about Michael Gorton and telemedicine and so many of the people we've interviewed. There's been this intense resistance to a movement, which has ultimately become commonplace.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of, it's like listening to the industry rather than like what's moral, or even legal, right? Like obviously we saw that with the legalizing of marijuana or decriminalization, like it went away as legal and people are like, well, this isn't immoral. Like, why was it such a bad thing all the time? And I think people are really seeing that with these psychedelics and ketamine, that it can be very helpful. It's done under a guided treatment plan. And also it's unlike antidepressants where people are expected to take them every single day for the rest of their life.
Right.
What she's talking about is a handful of sessions. And that is usually all these individuals need to kind of move on with a better life, which is crazy.
The stat she shared, maybe you remember the exact one, but the point of it was not very many people do well on antidepressants.
Yeah.
And when you hear the statistic in the show, it's pretty shocking to think that that is literally the first thing that most people will be prescribed when they're having a hard go, as opposed to something like this, like to your point, not lifelong.
Yeah. I mean, the fast talk of any kind of mood pill or antidepressant or anything like that is enough to scare the crap out of anybody.
Yeah. At the end of the commercials.
Yeah. All the fast talk of all the stuff that can go wrong with you, suicidal thoughts, all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, that's not good. So awesome idea. It's going to be really interesting to see where this goes, because this is something that, over half of this country is insured through an employer-sponsored healthcare plan. So they're going to have to be the first steps to kind of take this leap before we see it adopted by the larger health insurance carriers. So I kind of feel like it's right up our industry, and it's going to be kind of dependent on us and our peers to let this take the first steps in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think the more progressive, if you will, I know some people have emotional things tied to that word, but the more open-minded employers are, or even advisors like us, the quicker that this will become commonplace. And it's really interesting to think of yourself in a position where you have the ability to bring something like that to the wider market. Yeah, it's very empowering. So it was a great conversation with Sherry Rais. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, everybody, welcome to the Ethos Effect podcast. I am your host, Chelsea Ryckis, here with your other host, Donovan Ryckis. We have an awesome guest today. We're super excited to get to know her business, Sherry Rais, CEO of Enthea. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. How are you guys doing?
We're good. Yeah, we're super excited to hear more about your business. From the research that we've done, it seems kind of like a hot topic right now. So why don't you catch our listeners up, let them know what industry you're in and kind of what you're doing.
So I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Enthea. We do reimbursements for root cause mental health treatments. We are starting with psychedelic-assisted therapy, and specifically ketamine-assisted therapy, because that's available and approved, which I'll get into hopefully on this show. And we are essentially trying to provide people with safe and affordable access to mental health treatments that actually work. And we're doing that through employer-sponsored benefit plans.
Amazing. And what got you into this business?
So that's an interesting story. I actually spent 10 years working on poverty reduction. I was consulting to the UN and the World Bank. And for those 10 years, I spent pretty much all of my time in country, meaning abroad. So a lot of times people will consult out of New York or out of DC and go for a couple weeks a year. But I decided to be in the field fully. I might have come back for Christmas holidays once a year. And I worked in really resource-constrained environments and saw firsthand the effects of the global mental health crisis. And as my goal was to reduce poverty, I started to see the connection between intergenerational poverty and trauma on community, and essentially that you can't fully address poverty without addressing mental health. And so I started to look for solutions to address mental health for the work I was doing. And I was really surprised to see that most of the ways we are currently treating mental health just aren't working well. I don't know any other area of medicine where we manage symptoms like this, but essentially, I remember reading a report that said antidepressants work well for 15% of the people that take them. And 58% of the people that take antidepressants experience moderate to severe side effects.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're saying yes and nodding your head yes, because if we think about our own lives or our family members or our friends, either we've been through it ourselves or we know someone who has, but people are going on and off different medications for years, if not decades. They come with a bunch of side effects. When they go off of them, they feel worse. So we're not really getting to the root cause of the problem.
Yeah.
And so anyways, this is a long answer to your question, but
No.
essentially I went down all these rabbit holes and I stumbled upon what was happening in the psychedelic space. This was about 6.5 years ago. And I saw the opposite. I saw clinical studies showing that 65 to 80% of people that do psychedelic-assisted therapy, which I'll explain what it is again later on the show, are showing that after 1 to 4 sessions, they're walking away with no PTSD or no depression or no anxiety. And so this is something that only requires a few administrations and seems to have very little side effects, and was backed by organizations like Johns Hopkins or NYU or Harvard or Berkeley. And
Right.
so to answer your question full circle, I went down that rabbit hole of psychedelic therapy and saw the benefits and wanting to see how to get people access to this. And before doing so in resource-constrained environments, which is still very much a passion of mine and something I try to do on the side, I realized that nobody in the world is really offering this at scale. We have great clinical trials, but not really scalable systems where people are accessing this. It's not mainstream. And so I decided to try to help change that.
So cool.
So can we start back a little bit? I think
Yes.
we've all heard of ketamine, but I
Yes.
think very few people know what it is other than a drug. So can you tell us what it is? What are the effects? Maybe when did it originate? And how did we get to this place where we're looking at using it for mental health?
Right. So ketamine is an anesthetic. It's been used as an anesthetic for 60 years or more. So it has over 5 or 6 decades of safety and efficacy data. It's in almost every hospital and ER and ambulance in the world, or at least in the country, but it is on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. So it's legal and approved everywhere.
Okay.
We use it in higher doses than we would for ketamine therapy in children. So we know it's safe.
Mhm.
And then it works on our NMDA receptors in the brain and is a dissociative. And I'm highlighting the receptor because traditional psychedelics work on the 5-HT2A receptors in the brain. So traditional psychedelics are known as LSD, which is known as acid, MDMA, commonly known as Molly, or ecstasy, and psilocybin, commonly known as magic mushrooms, those work on the 5-HT2A receptors. Ketamine works on a different receptor in the brain, but still has a similar effect of increasing neuroplasticity and reducing activity in the default mode network in the brain. So this is a lot of jargon, and I'm gonna try to simplify what all of that means by saying, essentially, when you take ketamine in a clinical setting with a therapist, in the dose that's required for ketamine therapy, you experience neuroplasticity in your brain such that new connections are able to be formed. You can sort of have a softening, a reset. You can revisit perhaps traumatic experiences in a more gentle way and process them and come out of the experience feeling healed.
So does it has to coincide, or it's a question, but I would hope it's a yes. Does it coincide with therapy?
So that's a great question. So ketamine is something that what Enthea offers is ketamine-assisted therapy. So that means we're offering ketamine alongside therapy, and it does coincide with therapy. There are places in the US where you can get ketamine infusions, and there is data to show that even just an IV infusion of ketamine without the therapy will be beneficial for treating mental health symptoms. However, there's more data to show that combined with therapy, it's even better.
Right.
And looking at other psychedelics, you cannot do something like MDMA or psilocybin and not do it with the therapy. So a more holistic way of doing this, or a more holistic approach, is doing it with therapy. And so that's what we're offering at Enthea.
If not through IV, is it a pill form?
So ketamine has different modes of administration. You can do IV, you can do IM, so like an injection, intramuscular, and you can also do sublingual, so lozenges. There are no pills.
Okay.
No.
That's good. Yeah. So talk to us about some of the reasons that maybe insurance doesn't want to cover ketamine or isn't covering ketamine. Other than it's an ancient industry that doesn't like change. Is there any other big red flags for them?
Let me not try to get in too much trouble, but I may get in trouble. That's okay.
Do it.
So insurance actually does cover a branded form of ketamine called S-ketamine. So one of the big pharma companies, which I won't name, but one could Google, took the ketamine molecule and split it in two and branded it as S-ketamine, and the mode of administration is a nasal spray.
Yes.
Now,
heard of this.
This is covered. Yeah. This is covered by almost every large insurance company. So it is covered. However, the way we know big pharma works, hopefully I'm not upsetting any listeners. The way we know.
Probably not. If they're listening to our podcast, I think you're in the clear, honestly.
Okay. Well, the way we know what happens, in this industry is that the cost of generic ketamine, which is what we use, is about $5 a dose. The cost of Spravato, which is the branded ketamine, is $600 to $900 a dose. So you can see right there a huge difference in cost and also a difference in protocol. The idea of using ketamine-assisted therapy is you're using a generic form of ketamine, you're doing it in conjunction with therapy, you're getting to the root cause of your suffering, you're walking away healed. So that's why I said, we're in the business of, root cause mental health treatments. And you are eventually, the goal is coming off of your antidepressants and feeling clear and free and better about life and not having to continue with antidepressants. That's the goal. And actually, I'll throw in that at Enthea, 82% of our members who have done ketamine-assisted therapy are no longer on antidepressants 1 year later. So that's what we are achieving. With S-ketamine, the branded form of ketamine, the protocol is different. The idea is that you come into the clinic, you do the nasal spray, but you stay on your antidepressants and you keep doing this nasal spray. And typically people stay on it for years. So it's for years. So it's like another medication to add to their closet of medications, or cabinet of medications, and they're not actually coming off of their antidepressants to do it. So I would call it less root cause, but I don't want to get in trouble.
All about the breaking of the status quo here. So you won't get in trouble from us. That's for sure.
So getting this kind of treatment into an employer healthcare plan, obviously that's what we do here. It is still kind of, like I said, like I didn't even fully know what ketamine is. I know like that it was used for in this, but when we're talking about kind of making it more accessible in insurance and having that discussion with an employer, what are the kind of reasons we're looking for? Is it to kind of de-risk that antidepressant, which obviously, like I think any commercial you've ever heard, the first thing you hear is suicidal thoughts, and that's terrifying. But what other kind of things are we looking to, like reduce unnecessary drug spend, these side effect laden drugs, like what kind of things?
So one, what we know is that right now, untreated mental health is costing employers a lot, right? So the conversation usually starts there. I have a report that I could share with you all to put in the, notes of this episode, but I have a report that says that untreated mental health actually costs U.S. employers $3.7 trillion, trillion with a T, a year. And that's the combination of the cost of treating mental health as well as the cost of like retention issues, because people will leave. It's actually the number one reason that Gen Zers and millennials left their job last year was due to mental health. And then the other part of that 3.7 trillion is the cost of like productivity. So for example, 62% of missed work days are attributed to mental health conditions. So this is definitely costing employers a lot. And then on top of that, there's all these reasons that employers are interested in terms of like having a competitive advantage in their benefits offering, having employees that are engaged and thriving and likely to recommend their company to others as a place to work. And as a result of all of this, it's a long way of answering your question, but that's kind of my style. As a result of all of this, employers have invested in mental health solutions. So when we're talking to employers, I think you're asking like, what does that conversation look like? Well, they've already invested in mental health solutions, which is great, in things like, I guess I'm allowed to name names like Lyra or Spring Health or Modern Health, all of which are great solutions and get people quicker access to therapy or a way to meditate or different tools to have in the toolkit. But what we know from data is that, unfortunately, because of what I expressed before, of like the fact that antidepressants like have all of these side effects and work well for 15% of the people that take them, and talk therapy, by the way, works well for 50% of the people that do it, but only after 15 to 20 sessions. And some people don't have that kind of patience.
Or money.
Pardon?
Or money.
Or money, exactly. And so what we are seeing is that regardless of what employers are currently offering, about 50% of people are silent sufferers. So nothing that is currently being offered to them will help them, because 30 to 60% of people with common mental health indications are actually treatment resistant. So they've tried 1 to 2 things for a significant period of time. It's not worked for them. It's not going to work for them. And so this is where this is an important advantage for employers to offer, to add to the toolkit, because this is something that will address those people who are treatment resistant and are suffering in silence.
So do you essentially have a network of providers that are certified to administer this? Is it done? I mean, I think about our clients, they're all over the country. How do you handle multi-state, multi-location employers? And then the third question would be, is it a utilization-based fee model?
Yes. Yes to all of your questions.
It seemed like the most logical way to do this. So
we spent a long time before going to market, before even building a provider network. First, we had to build standards of care and a credentialing process and a way to vet providers, because this is a new industry. So there isn't like a third-party board to look at. So we actually worked with the world's leading experts from top institutions on ketamine and came up with a way to vet providers and then and all of the medical processes and standards of care to go with that. And then we started building our provider network. We are adding about 5 providers every week, and we have hundreds of providers across the country. We've partnered with almost 1,000 providers. And so we have nationwide availability. And yes, we are treating this on utilization because based on utilization, doing something like per employee per month doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to the employer. It doesn't make sense to us. So it's totally based on utilization.
I love it. And then let's switch a little bit to the business side. So you said you co-founded your company?
I did.
Awesome. So obviously we co-founded our company, and we always like to ask about partnerships and whatnot. So talk us through, are there certain things that you've been instrumental in and maybe your partner does something different, or you operations and there's something else? How do you guys manage all of that?
I would love to throw that question back at you guys since you're married.
Yeah,
so
that's an additional layer.
I'm curious how that works. Actually, in the psychedelic space, that's not uncommon. Probably in the world, that's not that uncommon. But there are a few companies that have been co-founded by like romantic partners. Journey Clinical is a great one, and Beyond Ibogaine Clinic is another. Just to give shout outs to great companies started by other partners. But so with me, I'm really lucky. I actually don't have one like the direct healthcare or employer benefits experience, and I'm not a clinician. I'm definitely a doer and implementer. I love everything ops, growth, finances, raising money. It's like love-hate relationship.
Fair.
It feels good when you're doing it, but like it takes a lot of time to do. But one of my co-founders, his name is Dr. Dan Rome. So he complements me really well. He's a psychiatrist with 40 years of experience. He's had leadership roles at Beacon Health and Tufts Health. So he's been on like the payer and health plan side of things. Our head of sales and partnerships comes with 15 years of experience in employer benefits and was also worked as a broker. And also ketamine therapy saved her life in many ways. And then my head of like customer success also comes from the health plan side, also 15 years of experience. And she has her own profound experience with ketamine. And so I think what I can say, I mean, I'm really grateful to my team. Everyone brings different things to the table, but the most beautiful thing is how mission aligned everyone is. So I've just been really lucky to attract people that this isn't a job for them. People are here because this means a lot.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting too that you mentioned the people who've been impacted by it themselves. So I'm curious, like, has it worked for you? Have you tried it?
So I'm really lucky that I have not experienced, I guess, like depression or anxiety, clinical depression or anxiety in that way. Not that I've not had my moments, we all do, or gone through like phases where I felt down or stressed. And I've definitely had, we've all had our share of traumatic events happen to us. But I've been very lucky and filled with gratitude that I've had tools in my toolbox that have helped me in terms of like resilience and strength. So I've never needed to turn to psychedelic-assisted therapy for treating a diagnosable condition.
Right.
I have experienced the profound, like transformative effects of psychedelic-assisted therapy. So yes, I have tried it, and in other ways, not covered by insurance, nor not covered probably by your employer. There's a lot of work on like optimization using psychedelic-assisted therapy and feeling more connected, more spiritual, connected to nature, connected to God.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a study that I won't remember the statistic offhand, but I know that it's a majority of people that have done psychedelic therapy rated in their top 3 life experiences, like up there with getting married and having a child.
Yeah, I've heard that
And
too.
yeah, and so again, this is like definitely not what's gonna be covered by insurance or be covered by employers. They're not gonna like advocate for like go out and do psychedelics so you can have a great life experience unless
Right.
you have like a really cool boss. But
So
I can
true.
definitely say it is extremely profound. And I have been also really lucky that since I've gotten in this space, I've been able to help friends and family members who did need the treatment because they did have a diagnosable condition
Yeah.
get access to it. And I've seen the transformation in them. And that's been like life-changing even for my relationships with them.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So where is all this hopefully headed? Do we hope to see it in part of like Buka plans? Is this going to be an add-on for many years with, larger employers with self-funded plans? What's the next step in the future?
So for starters, I'll say with Enthea, we currently have just over 150,000 covered lives. And we just started, and I'm hoping we get to 3 million covered lives in 2026. So that's one of Enthea's short-term goals. But what that will do in terms of like a domino effect, if we do have 3 million covered lives in the next 2 years, is that'll send a strong signal, like you said, to the Buka plans, to more employers, to more people to make this more mainstream. And so the broader vision is that, one, I would love to see that ketamine assisted therapy is a mainstream option, something that people can talk about without the stigma. I'd also love to see other psychedelics become FDA approved. So just a little note on where we are there. LSD, commonly known as acid, MDMA, commonly known as Molly, and psilocybin, commonly known as magic mushrooms, all of them have been given breakthrough status by the FDA because they've just recognized the incredible outcomes they've seen in clinical trials so far. And MDMA is actually slated for approval this August. So we are like on the cusp of something really changing. If that does become FDA approved this August, fingers crossed, Enthea will be ready to offer it to employers as a benefit pretty much right away because we're building the infrastructure, in preparation for that. And then honestly, beyond that, yes, again, going back to I'd love to see Blue Cross and Anthem and United offer this, but really I just want to see people healed. This common narrative of so many people struggling, especially in silence with their mental health and not being able to talk about it and scared to try medications because of the side effects, but then suffering even more because they're not doing anything and ruining their relationships with friends or family members or themselves, or not being able to live purposeful, meaningful lives because they're struggling with their mental health. I want that. It might sound very idealistic, but I would love for that to not be the world we live in. Rick Doblin, who is the founder of MAPS, which is basically the organization everyone in the psychedelic space owes a lot of gratitude towards because they've been leading the way with research for the past 35 years. He talks about a world with net zero trauma. And again, idealistic goal, but quite a good one to have.
No kidding. There seems to be a common theme with the last few episodes that we've been recording, and it's all about this collective good and eliminating collective suffering and not believing the big lies that are out there, right? The one that we face every day is the lie is that employers can't do anything to solve their healthcare problem, right? The one you're facing is, if antidepressants don't work for you and therapy doesn't work for you, sorry, you're just messed up, right? We spoke to a doctor recently about longevity, and the whole thing there was sorry, you're going to age. It is what it is. And it's just about breaking these just collective mindsets that have just accepted the status quo as it is. So while I think we will probably get a lot of listeners listening to this podcast because they're like, ooh, ketamine, how edgy. It's probably not going to be edgy very quickly, and it's just going to be high efficacy, and it's just going to work. So I
Yeah.
think the work that you're doing is awesome. Last question for you. I'm curious, and maybe you just answered it a little bit, but do you have a guiding ethos and a principle that's like encouraged you to take this on as a business model and really try to change the world?
Yes, I do. I did just touch on it a little bit, but my ethos, not just for my work, but for everything I do, is pretty simple. Whatever you do, approach it with intention and purpose. And for me, doing everything with intention means approaching each action, each decision, and interaction with a very deliberate purpose and a clear understanding of your desired outcomes. It sounds maybe silly, but I mean, like, even when I like wake up, or I choose to brush my teeth, or I choose to like eat this for breakfast, it's intentional. And I guess that involves being fully present and mindful, ensuring that every step you take aligns with your core values and long-term goals. And for me, like, so taking that a step further, like what is my intention? What is my purpose broadly? It's deeply rooted in the pursuit of reducing human suffering and enhancing well-being. So
I love it.
I could go on and on, but I think
No,
that
that's awesome. And I think the work that you're doing is just so aligned with obviously who you are and your ethos. So I have no doubt that you will be a common, denominator in healthcare plans in no time. Where can our listeners find you?
You can find more about Enthea on enthea.com, which is ENTHEA.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's the only social media I have, but it's just Sherry Rais. And you can, I guess, email me. I love getting emails. So Sherry, SHERRY at enthea.com. And yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was a super enlightening conversation and super excited to see where your business is going.